Wrong Pigeon, a Philip Marlowe story, written by Raymond Chandler. He was a slightly fat man with a dishonest smile that pulled the corners of his mouth out half an inch, leaving the thick lips tight and his eyes bleak. For a fattish man, he had a slow walk. Most fat men are brisk and light on their feet. He wore a grey herringbone suit and a hand-painted tie with part of a diving girl visible on it. His shirt was clean, which comforted me, and his brown loafers, as wrong as the tie for the suit, shone from a recent polishing. He sidled past me as I held the door between the waiting room and my thinking parlour. Once inside, he took a quick look round. I'd have placed him as a mobster, second grade, if I'd been asked. For once I was right. If he carried a gun, it was inside his pants. His coat was too tight to hide the bulge of an underarm holster. He sat down carefully, and I sat opposite, and we looked at each other. His face had a sort of foxy eagerness. He was sweating a little. The expression on my face was meant to be interested, but not clubby. I reached for a pipe and the leather humidor in which I kept my Pierce's tobacco. I pushed cigarettes at him. I don't smoke. He had a rusty voice. I didn't like it any more than I liked his clothes, or his face. While I filled the pipe, he reached inside his coat, prowled in a pocket, came out with a bill, glanced at it, and dropped it across the desk in front of me. It was a nice bill, and clean, and new. $1,000. Ever save a guy's life? Once in a while, maybe. Save mine. What goes? I heard you levelled with the customers, Marlowe. That's why I stayed poor. I still got 2 friends. You make it 3 and you'll be out of the red. You got $5,000 coming if you pry me loose. From what? You're talkative as hell this morning. Don't you pipe who I am? Nope. Never been east, huh? Sure, but I wasn't in your set. What set would that be? I was getting tired of it. Stop being so goddamn cagey or pick up your grand and be missing. I'm Mickey Rosenstein. I'll be missing, but good, unless you can figure some out. Guess. I've already guessed. You tell me and tell me quick. I don't have all day to watch you feeding me with an eyedropper. I ran out on the outfit. The high boys don't go for that. To them, it means you got info you figure you can peddle, or you got independent ideas, or you lost your moxie. Me? I lost my moxie. I had it up to here. He touched his Adam's apple with the forefinger of a stretched hand. I done bad things, scared and hurt guys. I never killed nobody. That's nothing to the outfit. I'm out of line, so they pick up the pencil and they draw a line. I got the word. The operators are on the way. I made a bad mistake. I tried to hole up in Vegas. I figured they'd never expect me to lie up in their own joint. They outfigured me. What I did's been done before, but I didn't know it. When I took the plane to L.A., there must have been somebody on it. They know where I live. Move? No good now. I'm covered. I knew he was right. Why haven't they taken care of you already? They don't do it that way. Always specialists. Don't you know how it works? More or less. A guy with a nice hardware store in Buffalo. A guy with a small dairy in KC. Always a good front. They report back to New York or somewhere. When they mount the plane west, or wherever they're going, they have guns in their briefcases. They're quiet and well-dressed, and they don't sit together. There could be a couple of lawyers or income tax sharpies. Anything at all that's well-mannered and inconspicuous. All sorts of people carry briefcases, including women. Correct as hell. And when they land, they'll be steered to me, but not from the airfield. They got ways. If I go to the cops, somebody'll know about me. They could have a couple of mafia boys right on the city council for all I know. It's been done. The cops'll give me 24 hours to leave town. No use. Mexico? Worse than here. Canada? Better, but still no good. Connections there, too. Australia? Can't get a passport. I've been here 25 years, illegal. They can't deport me unless they can prove a crime on me. The outfit would see they didn't. Suppose I got tossed into the freezer. I'm out on a writ in 24 hours, and my nice friend's got a car waiting to take me home. Only not home. I had my pipe lit and going well. I frowned down at the grand note. I could use it very nicely. My checking account could kiss the sidewalk without stooping. Let's stop horsing, I said. Suppose, just suppose, I could figure it out for you. What's your next move? I know a place. If I could get there without being tailed, I'd leave my car here and take a rent car. I'd turn it in just short of the county line and buy a second-hand job. Halfway to where I'm going, I trade it on a new lasts model, a leftover. This is just the right time of year. Good discount. New models out soon. Not to save money, less show off. Where I'd go is a good-sized place, but it's still pretty clean. Uh-huh, I said. Wichita, last I heard. But may have changed. He scowled at me. Get smart, Marlowe, but not too damn smart. I'll get as smart as I want to. Don't try to make rules for me. If I take this on, there aren't any rules. I take it for this grand and the rest if I bring it off. Don't cross me. I might leak information. If I get knocked off, put just one red rose on my grave. I don't like cut flowers. I like to see them growing. But I could take one because you're such a sweet character. When's the plane in? Sometime today. It's 9 hours from New York. It'll probably come in about 5:30 p.m. Might come by San Diego and switch, or by San Francisco and switch. A lot of planes from Dago and Frisco. I need a helper. God damn you, Marlowe. Hold it. I know a girl, daughter of a chief of police who got broken for honesty. She wouldn't leak under torture. You got no right to risk her, Icky said angrily. I was so astonished my jaw hung halfway to my waist. I closed it slowly and swallowed. Good God, the man's got a heart. Women ain't built for the rough stuff, he said grudgingly. I picked up the $1,000 note and snapped it. Sorry, no receipt, I said. I can't have my name in your pocket. And there won't be any rough stuff. If I'm lucky, they'd have me outclassed. There's only one way to work it. Now, give me your address and all the dope you can think of, names, descriptions of any operators you have ever seen in the flesh. He did. He was a pretty good observer. Trouble was, the outfit would know what he'd seen. The operators would be strangers to him. He got up silently and put his hand out. I had to shake it, but what he'd said about women made it easier. His hand was moist. Mine would have been in his spot. He nodded and went out silently. It was a quiet street in Bay City, if there are any quiet streets in this beatnik generation where you can't get through a meal without some male or female stomach singer belching out a kind of love that is old-fashioned as a bustle or some Hammond organ jazzing it up in the customer's soup. This little one-story house was as neat as a fresh pinafore. The front lawn was cut lovingly and very green. The smooth composition driveway was free of grease spots from standing cars, and the hedge that bordered it looked as though the barber came every day. The white door had a knocker with a tiger's head, a go-to-hell window, and a dingus that let someone inside talk to someone outside without even opening the tiny window. I'd have given a mortgage on my left leg to live in a house like that. I didn't think I ever would. The bell chimed inside, and after a while she opened the door in a pale blue sports shirt and white shorts that were short enough to be friendly. She had grey-blue eyes, dark red hair, and fine bones in her face. There was usually a trace of bitterness in the grey-blue eyes. She couldn't forget that her father's life had been destroyed by the crooked power of a gambling ship mobster, that her mother had died too. She was able to suppress the bitterness when she wrote nonsense about young love for the shiny magazines, but this wasn't her life. She didn't really have a life. She had an existence without much pain and enough oil money to make it safe. But in a tight spot, she was as cool and resourceful as a good cop. Her name was Anne Reardon. She stood to one side, and I passed her pretty close. But I have rules too. She shut the door and parked herself on a davenport and went through the cigarette routine, and here was one doll who had the strength to light her own cigarette. I stood looking round. There were a few changes, not many. "I need your help," I said. "That's the only time I ever see you. I've got a client who's an ex-hood. He used to be a troubleshooter for the outfit, the syndicate, the big mob, or whatever name you want to use for it. You know damn well it exists and is as rich as Rockefeller. You can't beat it because not enough people want to, especially the million-a-year lawyers that work for it and the bar associations that seem more anxious to protect other lawyers in their own country. My God, are you running for office somewhere? I never knew you to sound so pure." She moved her legs round, not provocatively. She wasn't the type. But it made it difficult for me to think straight just the same. "Stop moving your legs around," I said, "or else put a pair of slacks on. Damn you, Marlowe, can't you think of anything else?" "I'll try. I like to think that I know at least one pretty and charming female who doesn't have round heels." I swallowed and went on. "The man's name is Icky Rosenstein. He's not beautiful, and he's not anything that I like, except one. He got mad when I said I needed a girl helper. He said women were not made for the rough stuff. That's why I took the job. To a real mobster, a woman means no more than a sack of flour. They use women in the usual way, but if it's advisable to get rid of them, they do it without a second thought. So far you told me a whole lot of nothing. Perhaps you need a cup of coffee or a drink." "You're sweet, but I don't in the morning, except sometimes, and this isn't one of them. Coffee later. Icky has been penciled." "Now, what's that?" "You have a list. You draw a line through a name with a pencil. The guy is as good as dead. The outfit has reasons. They don't do it just for kicks anymore. They don't get any kick. It's just bookkeeping to them." "What on earth can I do?" I might even have said, "What can you do?" "I can try. What you can do is help me spot their plane and see where they go, the operators assigned to the job." "How can you do anything?" I said I could try. "If they took a night plane, they're already here. If they took a morning plane, they can't be here before 5 or so. Plenty of time to get set. You know what they look like." "Oh, sure, I meet killers every day. I have them in for whiskey sours and caviar on hot toast." She grinned. While she was grinning, I took 4 long steps across the tan-figured rug and lifted her and put a kiss on her mouth. She didn't fight me, but she didn't go all trembly either. I went back and sat down. "They look like anybody who's in a quiet, well-run business or profession. They'll have quiet clothes, and they'll be polite when they want to be. They'll have briefcases with guns in them that have changed hands so often they can't possibly be traced. When and if they do the job, they'll drop the guns. They'll probably use revolvers, but they could use automatics. They won't use silencers because silencers can jam a gun, and the weight makes it hard to shoot accurately. They won't sit together on the plane, but once off of it, they may pretend to know each other, or simply not to have noticed during the flight. They may shake hands with appropriate smiles and walk away and get in the same taxi. I think they'll go to a hotel first, but very soon they'll move into something from which they can watch Icky's movements and get used to his schedule. They won't be in a hurry unless Icky makes a move. That would tip them off that Icky has been tipped off. He has a couple of friends left, he says. Will they shoot him from this room or apartment across the street, assuming there is one? No, they'll shoot him from 3 feet away. They'll walk up behind him and say, "Hello, Icky." He'll either freeze or turn. They'll fill him with lead, drop the guns, and hop into the car they have waiting. Then they'll follow the crash car off the scene. who'll drive the crashed car. Some well-fixed and blameless citizen who hasn't been wrapped. He'll drive his own car. He'll clear the way, even if he has to accidentally on purpose crash somebody, even a police car. He'll be so goddamn sorry he'll cry all the way down his monogrammed shirt, and the killers will be long gone. Good heavens, Anne said. How can you stand your life? If you did bring it off, they'll send operators to you. I don't think so. They don't kill a legit. The blame will go to the operators. Remember, these top mobsters are businessmen. They want lots and lots of money. They only get really tough when they figure they have to get rid of somebody, and they don't crave that. There's always a chance of a slip-up. Not much of a chance. No gang killing has ever been solved here or anywhere else except 2 or 3 times. Lepke Buchalter fried. Remember Anastasia? He was awful big and awful tough. Too big. Too tough. Pencil. She shuddered a little. I think I need a drink myself. I grinned at her. You're right in the atmosphere, darling. I'll weaken. She brought a couple of Scotch highballs. When we were drinking them, I said, if you spot them, or think you spot them, follow to where they go, if you can do it safely, not otherwise. If it's a hotel, and 10 to 1 it will be, check in and keep calling me until you get me. She knew my office number, and I was still on Yucca Avenue. She knew that too. You're the damnedest guy, she said. Women do anything you want them to. How come I'm still a virgin at 28? We need a few like you. Why don't you get married? To what? Some cynical chaser who has nothing left but technique? I don't know any really nice men. Except you. I'm no pushover for white teeth and a gaudy smile. I went over and pulled her to her feet. I kissed her, long and hard. I'm honest, I almost whispered. That's something. But I'm too shop-soiled for a girl like you. I've thought of you. I've wanted you. But that sweet, clear look in your eyes tells me to lay off. Take me, she said softly. I have dreams too. I couldn't. It's not the first time it's happened to me. I've had too many women to deserve one like you. We have to save a man's life. I'm going. She stood up and watched me leave with a grave face. The women you get and the women you don't get, they live in different worlds. I don't sneer at either world. I live in both myself. At Los Angeles International Airport, you can't get too close to the planes unless you're leaving on one. You see them land, if you happen to be in the right place, but you have to wait at a barrier to get a look at the passengers. The airport buildings don't make it any easier. They're strung out from here to breakfast time, and you can get calluses walking from TWA to American. I copied an arrival schedule off the boards and prowled round like a dog that has forgotten where he put his bone. Planes came in, planes took off. Porters carried luggage, passengers sweated and scurried, children whined, the loudspeaker overrode all the other noises. I passed Anne a couple of times. She took no notice of me. At 5:45 they must have come. Anne disappeared. I gave it half an hour, just in case she had some other reason for fading. No, she was gone for good. I went out to my car and drove some long, crowded miles to Hollywood and my office. I had a drink and sat. At 6:45, the phone rang. I think so, she said. Beverly Weston Hotel, room 410. Couldn't get any names. You know the clerks don't leave registration cards lying around these days. I didn't like to ask any questions, but I rode up in the elevator with them and spotted their room. I walked right on past them when the bellman put a key in her door, and walked down to the mezzanine, and then downstairs with a bunch of women from the tea room. I didn't bother to take a room. What were they like? They came up the ramp together, but I didn't hear them speak. Both had briefcases. Both wore quiet suits. Nothing flashy. White shirts, starched. One blue tie, one black, striped with grey. Black shoes. A couple of businessmen from the East Coast. They could be publishers, lawyers, doctors, account executives. No, cut the last. They weren't gaudy enough. You wouldn't look at them twice. Look at them twice. Faces. Both medium brown hair, one a bit darker than the other, smooth faces, rather expressionless. One had grey eyes, the one with the lighter hair had blue eyes. Their eyes were interesting, very quick to move, very observant, watching everything near them. That might have been wrong. They should have been a bit preoccupied with what they came out for, or interested in California. They seemed more occupied with faces. It's a good thing I spotted them and not you. You don't look like a cop, but you don't look like a man who is not a cop. You have marks on you. Phooey, I'm a damn good-looking heart-wrecker. Their features were strictly assembly line. Neither looked Italian. Each picked up a flight suitcase. One suitcase was grey with two red and white stripes up and down, about 6 or 7 inches from the ends. The other a blue and white tartan. I didn't know there was such a tartan. There is, but I forget the name of it. I thought you knew everything. Just almost everything. Run along home now. Do I get a dinner and maybe a kiss? Later, and if you're not careful, you'll get more than you want. A rapist, eh? I'll carry a gun. You'll take over and follow them? If they're the right men, they'll follow me. I already took an apartment across the street from Icky. That block on Pointer and the two on each side of it have about 6 low-life apartment houses to the block. I'll bet the incidence of chippies is very high. It's high everywhere these days. So long, Anne. See you when you need help. She hung up. I hung up. She puzzled me. Too wise to be so nice. I guess all nice women are wise, too. I called Icky. He was out. I had a drink from the office bottle, smoked for half an hour, and called again. This time I got him. I told him the score up to then and said I hoped Anne had picked the right men. I told him about the apartment I had taken. Do I get expenses? I asked. 5 grand ought to cover the lot. If I earn it and get it, I heard you had $250,000. I said, at a wild venture. Could be, pal. But how do I get at it? The high boys know where it is. It'll have to cool a long time. I said that was all right. I'd cooled a long time myself. Of course, I didn't expect to get the 4,000, even if I brought the job off. Men like Icky Rosenstein would steal their mother's gold teeth. There seemed to be a little good in him somewhere, but little was the operative word. I spent the next half hour trying to think of a plan. I couldn't think of one that looked promising. It was almost 8 o'clock, and I needed food. I didn't think the boys would move that night. Next morning, they would drive past Icky's place and scout the neighborhood. I was ready to leave the office when the buzzer sounded from the door of my waiting room. I opened the communicating door. A small, tight-looking man was standing in the middle of the floor, rocking on his heels with his hands behind his back. He smiled at me, but he wasn't good at it. He walked towards me. You Marlowe? Who else? What can I do for you? He was close now. He brought his right hand round fast with a gun in it. He stuck the gun in my stomach. You can lay off Icky Rosenstein, he said in a voice that matched his face, or you can get a belly full of lead. He was an amateur. If he'd stayed 4 feet away, he might have had something. I reached up and took the cigarette out of my mouth and held it carelessly. What makes you think I know any Icky Rosenstein? He laughed, a high-pitched laugh, and pushed his gun into my stomach. Wouldn't you like to know? The cheap sneer, the empty triumph of power when you hold a fat gun in a small hand. It would be fair to tell me. As his mouth opened for another crack, I dropped the cigarette and swept a hand. I can be fast when I have to. There are boys that are faster, but they don't stick guns in your stomach. I got my thumb behind the trigger and my hand over his. I kneed him in the groin. He bent over with a whimper. I twisted his arm to the right, and I had his gun. I hooked a heel behind his heel, and he was on the floor. He lay there, blinking with surprise and pain, his knees drawn up against his stomach. He rolled from side to side, groaning. I reached down and grabbed his left hand and yanked him to his feet. I had 6 inches and 40 pounds on him. They ought to have sent a bigger, better-trained messenger. Let's go into my thinking parlor, I said. We could have a chat, and you could have a drink to pick you up. Next time, don't get near enough to a prospect for him to get your gun hand. I'll just see if you have any more iron on you." He hadn't. I pushed him through the door and into a chair. His breath wasn't quite so rasping. He grabbed out a handkerchief and mopped at his face. "Next time," he said between his teeth, "next time. Don't be an optimist. You don't look the part." I poured him a drink of scotch in a paper cup, set it down in front of him. I broke his .38 and dumped the cartridges into the desk drawer. I clicked the chamber back and laid the gun down. "You can have it when you leave, if you leave." "That's a dirty way to fight," he said, still gasping. "Sure, shooting a man is so much cleaner. Now, how did you get here?" "Screw yourself." "Don't be a crumb. I have friends, not many, but some. I can get you for armed assault, and you know what would happen then. You'd be out on a writ or on bail, and that's the last anyone would hear of you. The biggies don't go for failures. Now, who sent you? And how did you know where to come?" "Icky was covered," he said sullenly. "He's dumb. I trailed him here without no trouble at all. Why would he go to see a private eye? People want to know." "More." "Go to hell." "Come to think of it, I don't have to get you for armed assault. I can smash it out of you right here and now." I got up from the chair, and he put a flat hand out. "If I get knocked about, a couple of real tough monkeys will drop round. If I don't report back, same thing. You ain't holding no real high cards. They just look high," he said. "You haven't anything to tell. If this Icky guy came to see me, you don't know why nor whether I took him on. If he's a mobster, he's not my type of client." "He come to get you to try save his hide." "Who from? That'd be talking." "Go right ahead. Your mouth seems to work fine. And tell the boys any time I front for a hood, that'll be the day. You have to lie a little once in a while in my business." I was lying a little. "What's Icky done to get himself disliked, or would that be talking?" "You think you're a lot of man," he sneered, rubbing the place where I'd need him. "In my league, you wouldn't make a pinch runner." I laughed in his face. Then I grabbed his right wrist and twisted it behind his back. He began to squawk. I reached into his breast pocket with my left hand and hauled out a wallet. I let him go. He reached for his gun on the desk, and I bisected his upper arm with a hard cut. He fell into the customer's chair and grunted. "You can have your gun," I told him, "when I give it to you. Now be good, or I'll have to bounce you just to amuse myself." In the wallet I found a driver's license made out to Charles Hicken. Did me no good at all. Punks of his type always have slangy pseudonyms. They probably called him Tiny or Slim or Marbles or even just You. I tossed the wallet back to him, fell on the floor, and he couldn't even catch it. "Hell," I said, "there must be an economy campaign on if they send you to do more than pick up cigarette butts." "Screw yourself." "All right, mug, beat it back to the laundry. Here's your gun." He took it, made a business of shoving it into his waistband, stood up, gave me as dirty a look as he had in stock, and strolled to the door, nonchalant as a hustler with a new mink stole. He turned at the door and gave me the beady eye. "Stay clean, tin horn. Tin bends easy." With this blinding piece of repartee, he opened the door and drifted out. After a little while, I locked my other door, cut the buzzer, made the office dark, and left. I saw no one who looked like a life-taker. I drove to my house, packed a suitcase, drove to a service station where they were almost fond of me, stored my car, and picked up a Hertz Chevrolet. I drove this to Pointer Street, dumped my suitcase in the sleazy apartment I'd rented early in the afternoon, and went to dinner at Victor's. It was 9 o'clock. Too late to drive to Bay City to take Anne to dinner. She'd have cooked her own long ago. I ordered a double Gibson with fresh limes and drank it, and I was as hungry as a schoolboy. On the way back to Pointer Street, I did a good deal of weaving in and out and circling blocks and stopping with a gun on the seat beside me. As far as I could tell, no one was trying to tail me. I stopped on Sunset as a service station and made 2 calls from the box. I caught Bernie Oles just as he was leaving to go home. "This is Marlowe, Bernie. We haven't had a fight in years. I'm getting lonely." Well, get married. I'm chief investigator for the sheriff's office now. I rank acting captain until I pass the exam. I don't hardly speak to private eyes. Speak to this one. I could need help. I'm on a ticklish job where I could get killed. And you expect me to interfere with the course of nature? Come off it, Bernie. I haven't been a bad guy. I'm trying to save an ex-mobster from a couple of executioners. The more they mow each other down, the better I like it. Yeah, if I call you, come running, or send a couple of good boys. You'll have had time to teach them. We exchanged a couple of mild insults and hung up. I dialed Icky Rosenstein. His rather unpleasant voice said, "Okay, talk." "Marlowe, be ready to move out about midnight. We spotted your boyfriends and they're holed up at the Beverly Western. They won't move to your street tonight. Remember, they don't know you've been tipped. Sounds chancy. Good God, it wasn't meant to be a Sunday school picnic. You've been careless, Icky. You were followed to my office. That cuts the time we have." He was silent for a moment. I heard him breathing. "Who by?" he asked. "Some little tweezer who stuck a gun in my belly and gave me the trouble of taking it away from him. I can only figure why they sent a punk on the theory that they don't want me to know too much in case I don't know it already. You're in for trouble, friend." "When not? I'll come over to your place about midnight. Be ready. Where's your car?" "Out front. Get in on a side street and make a business of locking it up. Where's the back door of your flop?" "In back. Where would it be? On the alley." "Leave your suitcase there. We walk out together and go to your car. We drive the alley and pick up the suitcase, or cases. Suppose some guy steals 'em?" "Yeah. Suppose you get dead. Which do you like better?" "Okay," he grunted. "I'm waiting, but we're taking big chances." "So do race drivers. Does that stop them?" "There's no way to get out but fast. Douse your lights about 10 and rumple the bed well. It would be good if you could leave some baggage behind. Wouldn't look so planned." He grunted another okay, and I hung up. The telephone box was well lighted outside. They usually are at service stations. I took a good long gander around while I pored over the collection of giveaway maps inside the station. I saw nothing to worry me. I took a map of San Diego just for the hell of it and got into my rent car. On Pointer, I parked round the corner and went up to my second-floor sleazy apartment and sat in the dark watching from my window. I saw nothing to worry about. A couple of medium-class chippies came out of Icky's apartment house and were picked up in a late-model car. A man about Icky's height and build went into the apartment house. Various people came and went. The street was fairly quiet. Since they put in the Hollywood freeway, nobody much uses the off-the-boulevard streets unless they live in the neighborhood. It was a nice fall night, or as nice as they get in Los Angeles' spoiled climate, clearish but not even crisp. I don't know what's happened to the weather in our overcrowded city, but it's not the weather I knew when I came to it. It seemed like a long time to midnight. I couldn't spot anybody watching anything, and no couple of quiet-suited men paged any of the 6 apartment houses available. I was pretty sure they'd try mine first when they came, and if Anne had picked the right man, and if anybody had come at all, and if the tweezer's message back to his bosses had done me any good or otherwise. In spite of the 100 ways Anne could be wrong, I had a hunch she was right. The killers had no reason to be cagey if they didn't know Icky had been warned. No reason but one. He had come to my office and had been tailed there. But the outfit, with all its arrogance of power, might laugh at the idea he had been tipped off or come to me for help. I was so small they would hardly be able to see me. At midnight, I left the apartment, walked 2 blocks watching for a tail, crossed the street, and went into Icky's dive. There was no locked door and no elevator. I climbed the steps to the 3rd floor and looked for his apartment. I knocked lightly. He opened the door with a gun in his hand. He probably looked scared. There were 2 suitcases by the door and another against the far wall. I went over and lifted it. It was heavy enough. I opened it. It was unlocked. "You don't have to worry," he said. "It's got everything a guy could need for 3-4 nights, and nothing except some clothes that I couldn't glom off in any ready-to-wear place." I picked up one of the other suitcases. Let's stash this by the back door. We can leave by the alley, too. We leave by the front door, just in case we're covered. Though I don't think so. We're just two guys going out together. Just one thing. Keep both hands in your coat pockets and the gun in your right. If anybody calls out your name behind you, turn fast and shoot. Nobody but a life-taker will do it. I'll do the same. I'm scared, he said in his rusty voice. Me too, if it helps any, but we have to do it. If you're braced, they'll have guns in their hands. Don't bother asking them questions they wouldn't answer in words. If it's just my small friend, we'll cool him and dump him inside the door. Got it? He nodded, licking his lips. We carried the suitcases down and put them outside the back office. I looked along the alley. Nobody, and only a short distance to the side street. We went back in and along the hall to the front. We walked out on Pointer Street with all the casualness of a wife buying her husband a birthday tie. Nobody made a move. The street was empty. We walked around the corner to Icky's rent car. He unlocked it. I went back with him for the suitcases. Not a stir. We put the suitcases in the car and started up and drove to the next street. A traffic light not working, a boulevard stop or two, the entrance to the freeway. There was plenty of traffic on it even at midnight. California is loaded with people going places and making speed to get there. If you don't drive 80 miles an hour, everybody passes you. If you do, you have to watch the rearview mirror for highway patrol cars. It's the rat race of rat races. Icky did a quiet 70. We reached the junction to Route 66 and he took it. So far, nothing. I stayed with him to Pomona. This is far enough for me, I said. I'll grab a bus back if there is one, or park myself in a motor court. Drive to a service station and we'll ask for a bus stop. Should be close to the freeway. Take us towards the business section. He did that and stopped midway of a block. He reached out his pocketbook and held out $4,000 bills to me. I don't really feel I've earned all that. It was too easy. He laughed with a kind of wry amusement on his pudgy face. Don't be a sap. I have it made. You didn't know what you was walking into. What's more, your troubles are just beginning. The outfit has eyes and ears everywhere. Perhaps I'm safe if I'm damn careful. Perhaps I ain't as safe as I think I am. Either way, you did what I asked. Take the dough. I got plenty. I took it and put it away. He drove to an all-night service station and we were told where to find the bus stop. There's a cross-country Greyhound at 2:25 a.m., the attendant said, looking at a schedule. They'll take you if they got room. Icky drove to the bus stop. We shook hands and he went gunning down the road towards the freeway. I looked at my watch and found a liquor store still open and bought a pint of scotch. Then I found a bar and ordered a double with water. My troubles were just beginning, Icky had said. He was so right. I got off at the Hollywood bus station, grabbed a taxi, and drove to my office. I asked the driver to wait a few moments. At that time of night, he was glad to. The colored nightman let me into the building. You work late, Mr. Marlowe, but you always did, didn't you? It's that sort of business, I said. Thanks, Jasper. Up in my office, I pawed the floor for mail and found nothing but a longish, narrowish box, special delivery, with a Glendale postmark. I opened it. It contained nothing at all but a new, freshly sharpened yellow pencil, the mobster's mark of death. I didn't take it too hard. When they mean it, they don't send it to you. I took it as a sharp warning to lay off. There might be a beating arranged. From their point of view, that would be good discipline. When we pencil a guy, any guy that tries to help him is in for a smashing. That could be the message. I thought of going to my house on Yucca Avenue. Too lonely. I thought of going to Ann's place in Bay City. Worse. If they got wise to her, real hoods would think nothing of raping her and then beating her up. It was the Pointer Street flop for me. Easily the safest place now. I went down to the waiting taxi and had him drive me to within 3 blocks of the so-called apartment house. I went upstairs, undressed, and slept raw. Nothing bothered me but a broken spring. That bothered my back. I lay until 3:30, pondering the situation with my massive brain. I went to sleep with a gun under the pillow, which is a bad place to keep a gun when you have one pillow as thick and soft as a typewriter pad. It bothered me, so I transferred it to my right hand. Practice had taught me to keep it there, even in sleep. I woke up with the sun shining. I felt like a piece of spoiled meat. I struggled into the bathroom and doused myself with cold water and wiped off with a towel you couldn't have seen if you held it sideways. This was a really gorgeous apartment. All it needed was a set of Chippendale furniture to graduate it into the slum class. There was nothing to eat, and I went out. Miss Nothing Marlowe might miss something. I had a pint of whiskey. I looked at it and smelled it, but I couldn't take it for breakfast on an empty stomach, even if I could reach my stomach, which was floating around near the ceiling. I looked into the closets in case a previous tenant might have left a crust of bread in a hasty departure. Nope. I wouldn't have liked it anyhow, not even with whiskey on it. So I sat at the window. An hour of that, and I was ready to bite a piece off a bellhop. I dressed and went round the corner to the rent car and drove it to an eatery. The waitress was sore too. She swept a cloth over the counter in front of me and let me have last customer's crumbs in my lap. "Look, sweetness," I said, "don't be so generous. Save the crumbs for a rainy day. All I want is 2 eggs, 3 minutes, no more, a slice of your famous concrete toast, a tall glass of tomato juice with a dash of Lee and Perrins, a big happy smile, and don't give anybody else any coffee. I might need it all." "I got a cold," she said. "Don't push me round. I might crack you one on the kisser." I had a rough night too. She gave me a half smile and went through the swing door sideways. It showed more of her curves, which were ample, even excessive. But I got the eggs the way I liked them. The toast had been painted with melted butter past its bloom. "No Lee and Perrins," she said, putting down the tomato juice. "How about a little Tabasco? We're fresh out of arsenic, too." I used 2 drops of Tabasco, swallowed the eggs, drank 2 cups of coffee, and was about to leave the toast for a tip, but I went soft and left a quarter instead. That really brightened her. It was a joint where you left a dime or nothing. Mostly nothing. Back on Pointer, nothing had changed. I got to my window again and sat. At about 8:30, the man I had seen go into the apartment house across the way, the one with the same sort of height and build as Icky, came out with a small briefcase and turned east. 2 men got out of a dark blue sedan. They were of the same height and very quietly dressed and had soft hats pulled low over their foreheads. Each jerked out a revolver. "Hey, Icky!" one of them called out. The man turned. "So long, Icky," the other man said. Gunfire racketed between the houses. The man crumpled and lay motionless. The 2 men rushed for their car and were off going west. Halfway down the block, I saw a caddy pull out and start ahead of them. In no time at all, they were completely gone. It was a nice, swift, clean job. The only thing wrong with it was that they hadn't given it enough time for preparation. They had shot the wrong man. I got out of there fast, almost as fast as the killers. There was a smallish crowd grouped around the dead man. I didn't have to look at him to know that he was dead. The boys were pros. Where he lay on the sidewalk on the other side of the street, I couldn't see him. People were in the way. But I knew just how he would look, and I already heard sirens in the distance. It could have been just the routine shrieking from Sunset, but it wasn't. So somebody had telephoned. It was too early for the cops to be going to lunch. I strolled round the corner with my suitcase and jammed into the rent car and went away from there. The neighborhood was not my piece of shortcake anymore. I could imagine the questions. "Just what took you over there, Marlowe? You got a flop of your own, ain't you?" "I was hired by an ex-mobster in trouble with the outfit. They'd sent killers after him." "Don't tell us he was trying to go straight." I don't know, but I liked his money." "Didn't do much to earn it, did you?" "I got him away last night. I don't know where he is now. I don't want to know." "You got him away?" "That's what I said." "Yeah, only he's in the morgue with multiple bullet wounds. Try something better, or somebody's in the morgue." And on and on. Policeman's dialogue. It comes out of an old shoebox. What they say doesn't mean anything. What they ask it doesn't mean anything. They just keep boring in until you're so exhausted you flip on some detail. Then they smile happily and rub their hands and say, "Kinda careless there, weren't you? Let's start all over again." The less I had of that, the better. I parked in my usual parking slot and went up to the office. It was full of nothing but stale air. Every time I went into the dump, it felt more and more tired. Why the hell hadn't I got myself a government job 10 years ago? Make it 15 years. I had brains enough to get a mail-order law degree. The country's full of lawyers that couldn't write a complaint without the book. So I sat in my office chair and disadmired myself. After a while, I remembered the pencil. I made certain arrangements with a .45 gun, more gun than I ever carry, too much weight. I dialed the sheriff's office and asked for Bernie Oles. I got him. His voice was sour. "Marlowe, I'm in trouble. Real trouble." "Why tell me?" he growled. "You must be used to it by now." "This kind of trouble you don't get used to. I'd like to come over and tell you." "You in the same office?" "The same." "Have to go over that way. I'll drop in." He hung up. I opened 2 windows. The gentle breeze wafted a smell of coffee and stale fat to me from Joe's Eats next door. I hated it. I hated myself. I hated everything. Oles didn't bother with my elegant waiting room. He rapped on my own door, and I let him in. He scowled his way to the customer's chair. "Okay, give." "Ever hear of a character named Dickie Rosenstein?" "Why would I? Record?" "An ex-mobster got disliked by the mob. They put a pencil through his name and sent the usual 2 tough boys on a plane. He got tipped and hired me to help him get away." "Nice clean work." "Cut it out, Bernie." I lit a cigarette and blew smoke in his face. In retaliation, he began to chew a cigarette. He never lit one. "Look," I went on, "suppose the man wants to go straight, and suppose he doesn't. He's entitled to his life as long as he hasn't killed anyone. He told me he hadn't." "And you believed the hood, huh? When do you start teaching Sunday school?" I neither believed him nor disbelieved him. I took him on. There was no reason not to. A girl I know and I watched the planes yesterday. She spotted the boys and tailed them to a hotel. She was sure what they were. Yeah, they looked it right down to their black shoes. They got off the plane separately and then pretended to know each other and not have noticed on the plane. This girl, would she have a name? Only for you. I'll buy if she hasn't cracked any laws. Her name's Anne Reardon. She lives in Bay City. Her father was once chief of police there, and don't say that makes him a crook, 'cause he wasn't. Uh-huh. Let's have the rest. Make a little time, too. I took an apartment opposite Icky. The killers were still at the hotel. At midnight, I got Icky out and drove with him as far as Pomona. He went on in his rent car, and I came back by Greyhound. I moved into the apartment on Pointer Street, right across from his dump. Why, if he was already gone? I opened the middle desk drawer and took out the nice sharp pencil. I wrote my name on a piece of paper and ran the pencil through it. "Because someone sent me this. I didn't think they'd kill me, but I thought they planned to give me enough of a beating to warn me off any more pranks. They knew you were in on it. Icky was tailed here by a little squirt who later came round and stuck a gun in my stomach. I knocked him around a bit, but I had to let him go. I thought Pointer Street was safer after that. I live lonely." "I get around," Bernie Oles said. "I hear reports. So they gunned the wrong guy. Same height, same build, same general appearance. I saw them gun him. I couldn't tell if it was the 2 guys from the Beverly Western. I'd never seen them. It was just 2 guys in dark suits with hats pulled down. They jumped into a blue Pontiac sedan, about 2 years old, and lammed off, with a big caddy running crash for them." Bernie stood up and stared at me for a long moment. "I don't think they'll bother with you now," he said. "They've hit the wrong guy. The mob will be very quiet for a while. You know something? This town is getting to be almost as lousy as New York, Brooklyn, and Chicago. We could end up real corrupt. We've made a hell of a good start. You haven't told me anything that makes me take action, Phil. I'll talk to the city homicide boys. I don't guess you're in any trouble, but you saw the shooting. They'll want that. I couldn't identify anybody, Bernie. I didn't know the man who was shot. How did you know it was the wrong man? You told me, stupid. I thought perhaps the city boys had a make on him. They wouldn't tell me if they had. Besides, they ain't hardly had time to go out for breakfast. He's just a stiff in the morgue to them until the ID comes up with something. But they'll want to talk to you, Phil. They just love their tape recorders. He went out, and the door whooshed shut behind him. I sat there wondering whether I had been a dope to talk to him, or to take Icky's troubles on. 5,000 green men said no, but they can be wrong too. Somebody banged on my door. It was a uniform holding a telegram. I receipted for it and tore it loose. It said, "On my way to Flagstaff. Mirador Motor Court. Think I've been spotted. Come fast." I tore the wire into small pieces and burned them in my big ashtray. I called Anne Reardon. "Funny thing happened," I told her, and I told her about the funny thing. "I don't like the pencil," she said, "and I don't like the wrong man being killed. Probably some poor bookkeeper in a cheap business, or he wouldn't be living in that neighborhood. You should never have touched it, Phil. Icky had a life. Where he's going, he might make himself decent. He can change his name. He must be loaded, or he wouldn't have paid me so much. I said I didn't like the pencil. You'd better come down here for a while. You can have your mail readdressed, if you get any mail. You don't have to work right away anyhow, and L.A. is oozing with private eyes." "You don't get the point. I'm not through with the job. The city dicks have to know where I am, and if they do, all the crime beat reporters will know too. The cops might even decide to make me a suspect. Nobody who saw the shooting is going to put out a description that means anything. The American people know better than to be witnesses to gang killings. All right, loud brain, but my offer stands." The buzzer sounded in the outside room. I told Anne I had to hang up. I opened the communicating door, and a well-dressed, I might say, elegantly dressed, middle-aged man stood 6 feet inside the outer door. He had a pleasantly dishonest smile on his face. He wore a white Stetson and one of those narrow ties that go through an ornamental buckle. His cream-colored flannel suit was beautifully tailored. He lit a cigarette with a gold lighter and looked at me over the first puff of smoke. "Mr. Marlowe," I nodded. "I'm Foster Grimes from Las Vegas. I run Rancho Esperanza on South Fifth. I hear you got a little involved with a man named Icky Rosenstein. Won't you come in?" He strolled past me into my office. His appearance told me nothing. A prosperous man who liked or felt it good business to look a bit Western. You see them by the dozen in the Palm Springs winter season. His accent told me he was an Easterner, but not New England. New York or Baltimore, likely. Long Island, the Berkshires, no, too far from the city. I showed him the customer's chair with a flick of the wrist and sat down in my antique swivel squeaker. I waited. "Where is Icky now, if you know?" "I don't know, Mr. Grimes." "How come you messed with him?" "Money." "A damn good reason," he smiled. "How far did it go?" "I helped him leave town. I'm telling you this, although I don't know who the hell you are, because I've already told an old friend-enemy of mine, a top man in the sheriff's office." "What's a friend-enemy?" "Lawmen don't go round kissing me, but I've known him for years, and we're as much friends as a private star can be with a lawman." "I told you who I was. We have a unique setup in Vegas. We own the place, except for one lousy newspaper editor who keeps climbing our backs and the backs of our friends. We let him live because letting him live makes us look better than knocking him off. Killings are not good business anymore. Like Icky Rosenstein. That's not a killing, it's an execution. Icky got out of line. So your gun boys had to rub the wrong guy. They could have hung around a little to make sure. They would have if you'd have kept your nose where it belonged. They hurried. We don't appreciate that. We want cool efficiency. Who's this great big fat we you keep talking about? Don't go juvenile on me, Marlowe. Okay, let's say I know. Here's what we want. He reached into his pocket and drew out a loose bill. He put it on the desk on his side. Find Icky and tell him to get back in line, and everything is okay. With an innocent bystander gunned, we don't want any trouble or any extra publicity. It's that simple. You get this now. He nodded at the bill. It was $1,000, probably the smallest bill they had. And another when you find Icky and give him the message. If he holds out, curtains. Suppose I say, take your goddamn grand and blow your nose with it. That would be unwise. He flipped out a Colt Woodsman with a short silencer on it. A Colt Woodsman will take one without jamming. He was fast, too. Fast and smooth. The genial expression on his face didn't change. I never left Vegas, he said calmly. I can prove it. You're dead in your office chair and nobody knows anything. Just another private eye that tried the wrong pitch. Put your hands on the desk and think a little. Incidentally, I'm a crack shot, even with this damned silencer. Just to sink a little lower in the social scale, Mr. Grimes, I ain't putting no hands on no desk, but tell me about this. I flipped the nicely sharpened pencil across to him. He grabbed for it after a swift change of the gun to his left hand, very swift. He held the pencil up so that he could look at it without taking his eyes off me. I said, it came to me by special delivery mail. No message, no return address, just the pencil. Think I've never heard about the pencil, Mr. Grimes. He frowned and tossed the pencil down. Before he could shift his long lithe gun back to his right hand, I dropped mine under the desk and grabbed the butt of the .45 and put my finger hard on the trigger. Look under the desk, Mr. Grimes. You'll see a .45 in an open-end holster. It's fixed there, and it's pointing at your belly. Even if you could shoot me through the heart, the .45 would still go off from a convulsive movement of my hand. And your belly would be hanging by a shred, and you would be knocked out of that chair. A .45 slug can throw you back 6 feet. Even the movies learned that at last. Looks like a Mexican standoff, he said, quietly. He holstered his gun. He grinned. Nice smooth work, Marlowe. We could use you. But it's a long, long time for you, and no time at all to us. Find Icky, and don't be a drip. He'll listen to reason. He doesn't really want to be on the run for the rest of his life. We trace him eventually. Tell me something, Mr. Grimes. Why pick on me? Apart from Icky, what did I ever do to make you dislike me? Not moving, he thought a moment, or pretended to. The Larson case. You helped send one of our boys to the gas chamber. That we don't forget. We had you in mind as a fall guy for Icky. You'll always be a fall guy unless you play it our way. Something will hit you when you least expect it. A man in my business is always a fall guy, Mr. Grimes. Pick up your grand and drift out quietly. I might decide to do it your way, but I have to think. As for the Larson case, the cops did all the work. I just happen to know where he was. I don't guess you miss him terribly. We don't like interference. He stood up. He put the grand note casually back in his pocket. While he was doing it, I let go of the .45 and jerked out my Smith & Wesson 5-inch .38. He looked at it contemptuously. I'll be in Vegas, Marlowe. In fact, I never left Vegas. You can catch me at the Esperanza. No, we don't give a damn about Larson personally. Just another gun handler. They come in gross lots. We do give a damn that some punk private eye fingered him. He nodded and went out by my office door. I did some pondering. I knew Icky wouldn't go back to the outfit. He wouldn't trust him enough if he got the chance. But there was another reason now. I called Ann Reardon again. I'm going to look for Icky. I have to. If I don't call you in 3 days, get hold of Bernie Oles. I'm going to Flagstaff, Arizona. Icky says he'll be there. You're a fool, she wailed. It's some sort of trap. Mr. Grimes of Vegas visited me with a silenced gun. I beat him to the punch, but I won't always be that lucky. If I find Icky and report to Grimes, the mob will leave me alone. You condemn a man to death? Her voice was sharp and incredulous. No, he won't be there when I report. He'll have to hop a plane to Montreal, buy forged papers. Montreal is almost as crooked as we are, and plane to Europe. He may be fairly safe there, but the outfit has long arms, and Icky will have a damn dull life staying alive. He hasn't any choice. For him, it's either hide or get the pencil. So clever of you, darling. What about your own pencil? If they meant it, they wouldn't have sent it. Just a bit of scare technique. And you don't scare, you wonderful, handsome brute. I scare, but it doesn't paralyze me. So long. Don't take any lovers till I get back. Damn you, Marlowe. She hung up on me. I hung up on myself. Saying the wrong thing is one of my specialities. I beat it out of town before the homicide boys could hear about me. It would take 'em quite a while to get a lead, and Bernie Oles wouldn't give a city dick a used paper bag. The sheriff's men and the city police cooperate about as much as two tomcats on a fence. I made Phoenix by evening and parked myself in a motor court on the outskirts. Phoenix was damned hot. The motor court had a dining room, so I had dinner. I collected some quarters and dimes from the cashier and shut myself in a phone booth and started to call the Mirador in Flagstaff. How silly could I get? Icky might be registered under any name, from Cohen to Corleone, from Watson to Wojciechowski. I called anyway, but got nothing but as much of a smile as you can get on the phone. So I asked for a room the following night. Not a chance unless somebody checked out, but they would put me down for a cancellation or something. Flagstaff is too near the Grand Canyon. Icky must have arranged in advance. That was something to ponder, too. I bought a paperback and read it. I set my alarm watch for 6:30. The paperback scared me so badly that I put two guns under my pillow. It was about a guy who bucked the hoodlum boss of Milwaukee and got beaten up every 15 minutes. I figured that his head and face would be nothing but a piece of bone with a strip of skin hanging from it. But in the next chapter he was as gay as a meadowlark. Then I asked myself why I was reading this drivel when I could have been memorizing the Brothers Karamazov. Not knowing any good answers, I turned the light out and went to sleep. At 6:30 I shaved and showered and had breakfast and took off for Flagstaff. I got there by lunchtime, and there was Icky in the restaurant eating mountain trout. I sat down across from him. He looked surprised to see me. I ordered mountain trout and ate it from the outside in, which is the proper way. Boning spoils it a little. "What gives?" he asked me with his mouth full, a delicate eater. "You read the papers?" "Just the sporting section." "Let's go to your room and talk about it. There's more than that." We paid for our lunches and went along to a nice double. The motor courts are getting so good that they make a lot of hotels look cheap. We sat down and lit cigarettes. "The two hoods got up too early and went over to Pointer Street. They parked outside your apartment house. They hadn't been briefed carefully enough. They shot a guy who looked a little like you." "That's a hot one," he grinned, "but the cops'll find out and the outfit'll find out, so the tag for me stays on." "You must think I'm dumb," I said. "I am. I thought you did a first-class job, Marlowe. What's dumb about that?" "What job did I do? You got me out of there pretty slick." "Anything about it you couldn't have done yourself?" "With luck, no, but it's nice to have a helper." "You mean sucker?" His face tightened, and his rusty voice growled, "I don't catch. And give me back some of that $5,000, will you? I'm shorter than I thought." "I'll give it back to you when you find a hummingbird in the salt shaker." "Don't be like that." He almost sighed and flicked a gun into his hand. I didn't have to flick. I was holding one in my side pocket. "I oughtn't to have pooped off," I said. "Put the heater away. It doesn't pay any more than a Vegas slot machine." "Wrong. Them machines pay the jackpot every so often. Otherwise, no customers." "Every so seldom, you mean. Listen good." He grinned. His dentist was tired waiting for him. "The setup intrigued me," I went on, debonair as Milo Vance in a Van Dyne story and a lot brighter in the head. "First off, could it be done? Second, if it could be done, where would I be? But gradually I saw the little touches that flaw the picture. Why would you come to me at all? The outfit isn't that naive. Why would they send a little punk like this Charles Hicken or whatever name he uses on Thursdays? Why would an old hand like you let anybody trail you to a dangerous connection? You slay me, Marlowe. You're so bright I could find you in the dark. You're so dumb you couldn't see red, white, and blue giraffe. I bet you were back there in your unbrain emporium playing with that 5 grand like a cat with a bag of catnip. I bet you were kissing the notes. Not after you handled them. Then why the pencil that was sent to me? Big, dangerous threat. It reinforced the rest. But like I told your choir boy from Vegas, they don't send them when they mean them. By the way, he had a gun too. A Woodsman 22 with a silencer. I had to make him put it away. He was nice about that. He started waving grands at me to find out where you were and tell him. A well-dressed, nice-looking front man for a pack of dirty rats. The Women's Christian Temperance Association and some bootlicking politicians gave them the money to be big, and they learned how to use it and make it grow. Now they're pretty well unstoppable, but they're still a pack of dirty rats, and they're always where they can't make a mistake. That's inhuman. Any man has a right to a few mistakes. Not the rats. They have to be perfect all the time, or else they get stuck with you. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I just know it's too long. Well, allow me to put it in English. Some poor jerk from the East Side gets involved with the lower echelons of a mob. You know what an echelon is, Icky? I've been in the army, he sneered. He grows up in the mob, but he's not all rotten. He's not rotten enough, so he tries to break loose. He comes out here and gets himself a cheap job of some sort and changes his name or names and lives quietly in a cheap apartment house. But the mob by now has agents in many places. Somebody spots him and recognizes him. It might be a pusher, a front man for a bookie joint, a night girl, even a cop that's on the take. So the mob, or call them the outfit, say through their cigar smoke, Icky can't do this to us. It's a small operation because he's small, but it annoys us, bad for discipline. Call a couple boys and have them pencil him. But what boys do they call? A couple they're tired of, been around too long, might make a mistake or get chilly toes. Perhaps they like killing. Yeah, that's bad too. That makes recklessness. The best boys are the ones that don't care either way. So, although they don't know it, the boys they call are on their way out. But it would be kind of cute to frame a guy they already don't like for fingering a hood named Larson. One of these puny little jokes the outfit takes big. Look, guys, we even got time to play footies with a private eye. Jesus, we can do anything. We could even suck our thumbs. So they send a ringer. The Tory brothers ain't ringers. They're real hard boys. They proved it, even if they did make a mistake. Mistake nothing. They got Icky Rosenstein. You're just a singing commercial in this deal. And as of now, you're under arrest for murder. You're worse off than that. The outfit will habeas corpus you out of the clink and blow you down. You've served your purpose, and you failed to finger me into a patsy. His finger tightened on the trigger. I shot the gun out of his hand. My gun in my coat pocket was small, but at that distance accurate, and it was one of my days to be accurate myself. He made a faint moaning sound and sucked at his hand. I went over and kicked him hard in the chest. Being nice to killers is not part of my repertoire. He went over backwards and sideways and stumbled 4 or 5 steps. I picked up his gun and held it on him while I tapped all the places, not just pockets or holsters, where a man could stash a second gun. He was clean, that way, anyhow. "What are you trying to do to me?" he said whiningly. "I paid you. You're clear. I paid you damn well." "We both have problems there. Yours is to stay alive." I took a pair of cuffs out of my pocket and wrestled his hands behind him and snapped them on. His hand was bleeding. I tied his show handkerchief round it. I went to the telephone. Flagstaff was big enough to have a police force. The DA might even have his office there. This was Arizona, a poor state, relatively. The cops might even be honest. I had to stick around for a few days, but I didn't mind that as long as I could have trout caught 8 or 9,000 feet up. I called Ann and Bernie Oles. I called my answering service. The Arizona DA was a young, keen-eyed man, and the chief of police was one of the biggest men I ever saw. I got back to L.A. in time and took Anne to Romanoff's for dinner and champagne. What I can't see, she said over a third glass of bubbly, is why they dragged you into it. Why they set up the fake Icky Rosenstein. Why didn't they just let the two life-takers do their job? I couldn't really say, unless the big boys feel so safe they're developing a sense of humor, and unless this Larson guy that went to the gas chamber was bigger than he seemed to be. Only 3 or 4 important mobsters have made the electric chair or the rope or the gas chamber. None that I know of in the life imprisonment states like Michigan. If Larson was bigger than anyone thought, they might have had my name on a waiting list. But why wait? She asked me. They'd go after you quickly. They can afford to wait. Who's going to bother them? Kefauver? He did his best. But do you notice any change in the setup, except when they make one themselves? Costello? Income tax rap like Capone. Capone may have had several hundred men killed and killed a few of them himself personally, but it took the Internal Revenue boys to get him. The outfit won't make that mistake often. What I like about you, apart from your enormous personal charm, is that when you don't know an answer, you make one up. The money worries me, I said. 5 grand of their dirty money. What do I do with it? Don't be a jerk all your life. You earned that money and you risked your life for it. You can buy Series E bonds. They'll make the money clean, and to me, that will be part of the joke. You tell me one good reason why they pulled the switch. You have more of a reputation than you realize, and how would it be if the false Icky pulled the switch? He sounds like one of these over-clever types that can't do anything simple. The outfit will get him for making his own plans, if you're right. If the DA doesn't, and I couldn't care less about what happens to him. More champagne, please. They extradited Icky, and he broke under pressure and named the 2 gunmen, after I had already named them the Torrey brothers. But nobody could find them. They never went home, and you can't prove conspiracy on one man. The law couldn't even get him for accessory after the fact. They couldn't prove he knew the real Icky had been gunned. They could have got him for some trifle, but they had a better idea. They left him to his friends. They turned him loose. Where is he now? My hunch says nowhere. Anne Reardon was glad it was all over and I was safe. Safe? That isn't a word you use in my trade.
If you like that story, consider supporting me as a patron. That way you help me make more stories for you and get access to a patrons-only library of stories. Lots more hours for you to listen to.
So that was Wrong Pigeon by Raymond Chandler. Came out in 1959 in 2 parts in the London Daily Mail between April the 6th and 10th in 1959. It's actually been known under a number of names. One was Marlowe Takes on the Syndicate. Philip Marlowe's Last Case is another, and The Pencil. You can see why. Sometimes it was abridged when it came out. So, and then after it coming out in the Daily Mail in London in April 59, it was published under the title The Wrong Pigeon in the US in February 1960 in the issue of Manhunt magazine. Now, you know, Manhunt and I think it's Dime Detective and Black Mask were the pulp detective story magazines that were all the rage between, the 20s and supposedly lingering on into the 70s, some of them. Okay. So the other interesting fact about this story is it's the last story that he ever wrote that was about Philip Marlowe. It's a short story. The previous year, he'd finished the last Philip Marlowe novel, which was called Playback, published in 1958. And that was his final completed Philip Marlowe novel, and which was set in the Californian resort town. It was to do with somebody called Eleanor King, a woman that he's hired to follow, who's just arrived in Los Angeles, which becomes a more intricate and morally ambiguous. And that's, of course, one of the key factors, the moral ambiguity of it. So Playback, the novel, wasn't considered, I think that's relevant because this story actually appears after, wasn't considered one of the best of the Marlowe stories, although people do admit it has flashes of brilliance. And also was conceived originally as a screenplay, and as he converted it into a novel, that uh, uh, may explain why some people found it a bit lacking in the Marlowe sharpness that they'd become used to. I'm going to say something about Philip Marlowe himself, a little bit about. No, not about Philip Marlowe. Yeah, I'm going to say something about Philip Marlowe, but I'm going to say something about Raymond Chandler, and I'm going to kind of look at some of the themes of the story, of course. But I first need to explain and perhaps apologise for the accent. You see, I've realised, and I think the first step to this is realising the problem, is that I can't help doing accents. I can't help it. I'm like a fat lad in a cake shop. I'm looking at that cream donut, and I know I shouldn't eat that cream donut because there's nothing about it that's going to do me any good, but I can't help it. I'm drawn to it with a magnetism that, and I felt my accent drifting, and it never achieved perfection. In my mind, as I was doing it, I was thinking, well, Chandler was a kind of, yeah, it was an American. This is a quintessential American story, but he was, he had Irish and English connections as well, which we'll say. But so, and I'm aware that it's less than perfect, and I can't help it. I wish I could. I honestly wish I could. It's like I feel it's when I started all this business, I used to read stories to my daughters, and there was a John Masefield story called "The Box of Delights," and in it there's a talking rat, and I would and there are various other characters, and I would always do the voices. And Catherine, my daughter, would be like, "Do the voice," and I would try not to do the voice. Go, "Do the voices, Dad," so that all the rats were always Cockneys. They're talking about eating cheese, and my Cockney accent is as bad as my American accent. And if you don't realise it is, it's because you've never heard a proper, or you're not a Cockney, you don't appreciate the nuances. As if possibly if you're from Bora Bora in the South Pacific, you won't recognise that my American accent is relatively atrocious. And I wish I could do it, and I hope it didn't spoil the story for you, because it was a good story. Let's talk about Raymond Ray. So Raymond Thornton Chandler was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1888. Though his early life was rather more transatlantic than your average American youth, his parents separated when he was quite young in 1895, so that makes him 11. His Irish mother took him to live with her relatives in Waterford in Ireland, and then they moved on to London. This early exposure to Britain shaped his accent and sensibilities. So when you hear that genre of stories, and particularly when you hear them portrayed by the likes of Cary Grant and all that kind of gang there is this mid-Atlantic accent that hovers in between England, because it's not Scottish or Irish, and America, and northeast American, New England type accents, posh New York, the Hamptons, think of all that. And so maybe I was aiming for something like that. But certainly, although his parents parted, he wasn't impoverished, because he went to Dulwich College in South London, which is a prestigious school to go to, where he received a classical education, and that means Latin and Greek. I was talking to a friend of mine, David, yesterday, who works in a bookshop, and he said a guy came in and asked to be sent to the classics section. So it's a big bookshop. He said to him, "Oh, it's up on the second floor." And this, all right, fine. So he came back and said, no. He wanted a copy of 1984 in the orange cover by George Orwell. So he wanted that kind of classic, not classics. So classics, of course, is Greek and Latin. Anyway, so Chandler claimed that this early exposure to this, and they wouldn't have just done Greek and Latin, they would have done English literature as well. And but it was a college for gentlemen, wasn't it? I actually went out. I knew two lads who'd gone to Dulwich College, and I went out with a girl who there's the equivalent school, James Allen School for Girls. I went out with her for a bit. I was obviously batting above my average in those days. So yeah, don't Oh God, I realised how offensive that can sound to people. I was joking. Okay. So rhythms and nuances of the English language, yeah. And then he went back to the US in 1912, and then he settled in Los Angeles, and he worked in a variety of jobs, including picking fruit, before finding more stable employment in the oil industry. And then he actually rose to become vice president of an oil company, but the Depression hit him hard, and he lost his job in 1932. This is interesting, reportedly due to alcoholism and his dalliances with the female staff. So there's Philip Marlowe for you. Who drinks a pint of whiskey, is looking at the whiskey bottle and thinking, can I have one? I never drink one in the morning except sometimes, you know. And then he's in his mid-40s, he turned to writing seriously, and he started selling to the pulp magazines. And because he was a very intelligent and diligent man, he studied the structure and style of hard-boiled fiction, because this is what it is, knowing that he needed to master the form before he could subvert it. And that, of course, is the great thing. You can't break the rules in an art form before you know. So you can't become arguably, you can't become an innovative modern dancer without knowing how to dance properly, classically, if you like. You can't become a rule-breaking artist without actually knowing how to paint, if you're that kind of artist. And this is, you know, clearly what Chandler thought. And then in 1933, he began publishing in Black Mask. And his first novel wasn't published until 1939, which was 20 years before he died. So he had 20 years to do all of that. So The Big Sleep introduced Philip Marlowe, the cynical, world-weary, but ultimately moral private detective. I think this is his redeeming factor, isn't it? Who'll become his signature creation. We see it in this story. Listen, he's a flawed human being. He likes drink a bit too much. His relationship with Anne Riordan is interesting. In that it shows his moral character, and in both ways really, that both the temptation and the resistance to temptation, and the way he deals with this Icky. You know, he feels some moral obligation to him. He feels he hasn't, you know, and I think that comes through, and he likes the fact that Icky is, you know, chivalrous about women. Even though he's got no other redeeming factor, and that's the only thing he likes about him. So, you know, there are save the cat moments in Philip Marlowe that makes him, and I think the best detectives, you know, I think even in the golden age, the best detectives have character flaws. I mean, Sherlock Holmes is an arrogant drug addict, but he's brilliant, and he is generally loyal to Watson, and we talked about this in the other stories. Hercule Poirot is a vain, what do you call him? Not martinet. What's the word? He's prissy, isn't he? He's pompous and prissy, but he's brilliant, and he's got a good moral compass generally. So I think that's the thing. This nuanced character that Chandler managed to create in Philip Marlowe is he's a man who life has kicked around a bit, Philip Marlowe, but and it shows, but he has redeeming factors anyway. So Philip Marlowe, Big Sleep, Farewell My Lovely 1940, The High Wind in 1942, The Lady in the Lake 1943, The Little Sister 1949, The Long Goodbye 1953, and then a big gap of 5 years until Playback, which came out in 1958, and as we've said, wasn't considered to be as brilliant as some of the other absolute classics. Of course, he worked also as a screenwriter in Hollywood, collaborating on Double Indemnity, 1944, with Billy Wilder, and they won an Academy Award for that. The Blue Dahlia, 1946. And then it's said that he didn't really have a trouble-free time in Hollywood because he clashed a lot with studio executives and struggled rather to maintain his artistic vision. There you go. And in his personal life, there was a lot of trouble as well, or, you know, there were tragedies as well, let's say. So Sissy Pascal, his wife, died in 1954, and that really hit him hard. And he struggled with depression and alcoholism, and he stopped writing to an extent, and he died in 1959. Now I don't know how to pronounce this. Let me look it up. See, it was worth it, wasn't it? La Jolla. I would have said that. I probably would have said something La Jolla. Well, it wasn't too far, but it's sort of Spanishy. Leaving behind a legacy, blah blah, as they always say. Let's look at Philip Marlowe and him as a character. So he's created, as we know, but he's far more than a gumshoe. He is a lens through which Chandler explores the moral ambiguities of post-war America. So I think, Chandler is American. He is quintessentially American, yet at the same time, he has things that aren't American. He has this European or this English education and this Irish family connection. And so he can look at, yeah, and I suppose particularly in those days, the USA was, and the rest of North America, Canada as well, was full of not too unrecently arrived European immigrants, Irish Americans, Italians, Polish, Dutch, etc., etc. Pretty much everybody, English, everybody from Europe, particularly Greek, of course. We could go on, but so there we are. So he, as we said, he appears in the Black Mask, but the Big Sleep, 1933, and then he's in 1940's Farewell My Lovely. In terms of his character development, he doesn't change fantastically much. He doesn't, he is still the same cynical, weary, morally ambiguous but morally present man that we see in this story as well. So we do see some subtle shifts in his perspective and worldview. In The Long Goodbye, for instance, he forms a genuine friendship with Terry Lennox, a relationship that ends tragically and forces Marlowe to confront the limitations of his own idealism. And it's said that, The Long Goodbye is his peak. Chandler, 1953. He's an outsider. He appears a solitary figure. I mean, he knows people, but he spends a lot of time in diners on his own and in his office on his own, and he does meet Anne in this case, but drinking whiskey and having very I think one thing about Chandler is his minor characters they're caricatures, but they are beautifully done, like the waitress. She only appears, what's her job? She appears to serve him coffee, but he sort of three things that writers do and to make a story work. One is the creation of character. The second is the creation of narrative. And the third is the descriptive work, which includes descriptions of people and interactions that puts the reader into the story. Because if you just, say we had an article about a biography, say he was a real person, private detective Philip Marlowe, and we'd say all these things, where he was born, who he was married to. We'd just done it with Raymond Chandler. And some of his personality would leak through, but it isn't the same as in a novel where we inhabit the person. They become either our eyes, our avatar, or if we don't get that close to them, they become our pal, and we feel for them, and we have to root for them, of course, as well. If we don't care about them, we can root for evil characters. We found out. Look at Hannibal Lecter. We can. Mad Max, we can root for morally ambiguous, or morally not even ambiguous, but fairly down and dirty characters. They usually have some redeeming factor, though. But we have these, and the two things I think that really Chandler does exceptionally well is, the dialogue, his prose. It's studied. It's nobody really spoke like that, I don't imagine. So it's quite baroque in that way. It's not naturalistic, but it's written in a way. It's artistry. It's like poetry in a way. Some kind of rap, 1950s slang rap, and then his character descriptions of these. With the Golden Age, thinking of, I think Conan Doyle does this reasonably well as well. But they're sort of all right. Watson. And Holmes has his ambiguities. I keep using that word, but he has his flaws, doesn't he? But Chandler's characters inhabit this broken world where everything, all hope is perpetually disappointed, but yet they struggle on with a sense of doing what's right. Look at Anne Reardon. She is appalled that he would abandon Icky Rosenstein, who is a bit of a heel, really, although he's chivalrous about women. So you see, he leaves little windows of light in these people, and the waitress is a grumpy old cow. But he manages to make her smile and stuff like that. So it's great the way he does it. I'm full of admiration for it. Anne Reardon, Anne Chandler, Raymond Marlowe. I say I mixed them up. Philip Marlowe himself, and in many senses, Marlowe is Chandler, perhaps the guy Chandler. If you projected Chandler out like a puppet, you'd get Philip. One of these shadow puppets. You'd get Philip Marlowe. He is perhaps the drinking, womanizing, essentially decent man in an undecent, not indecent, can be indecent as well, world. It leads us. So I mean, Marlowe operates outside power structures, doesn't he? He's at odds with the police. He's at odds with his wealthy clients. He's at odds with criminals, but he has this moral code, and he's willing to risk his own safety, as we see in this story, to protect the innocent and expose the guilty. He's also very clever. He's quick-witted. He's a tough guy. If it comes to it, he can punch with the best of them. And he diffuses situations with his humour, or even not diffuses them, but kind of turns them. So he's a knight errant in a trench coat. I found that, and I thought, that's it. He is a knight errant. Whereas the Arthurian knights, perhaps apart from Sir Lancelot, go out in their purity into the world to right wrongs. Marlowe does the same thing, but in a broken world. How does it fit into the hard-boiled? So look at James Cain's stuff. Dashiell Hammett, James Cain, they're the other guys we think of. There were others of the hard-boiled, It's gritty and realistic portrayal of crime. It's not just, you get an Agatha Christie story, and I love Dame Agatha. But, there's some guy murdered he's had his head staved in. And it's all very decent, and everybody sits around and, oh dear, where were you, Dorothy? I was at the garden party, and it's not real, is it? They're not even they're not horrified, they're not traumatized, they don't have to go and see a therapist. You've just seen your dad lying on the floor with your head staved in, man. And you're like, come on. But they're like, oh, well, yes. And even, Sherlock and Watson aren't that bothered by the crimes they witness, aren't they? These are gritty, realistic. I mean, I don't think, people. He talks about cooling the little guy, his little friend. So obviously he feels he could do that as well. But it just feels dirtier, doesn't it? In the sense you could feel the grime and you can see the rubbish, the what do you call it, trash blowing down the streets. So the hard-boiled emphasis is on action and directness. So whereas a Golden Age story would consist of the crime, I mean, it has its own conventions, but there's the crime, the things are described, and then we have the super brainy detective working it all out and presenting us with their denouement. But we don't have that in hard-boiled. We're right there throughout, and it's all about being there, doing. Now, the emphasis on external forces is also a hallmark of the hard-boiled genre. So he's pitted against powerful and ruthless criminals. And this is very much how thrillers have developed in our time. You don't get that so much in the early. Look at the early Golden Age stuff. They're not shadowy, powerful organizations. Either, the police are not corrupt, the mob is not there, politicians aren't bent in the Golden Age, but they certainly are. Okay. Indeed, and this interaction between Bernie Oles, the copper, who he doesn't work for the county, does he? And he wouldn't give him a brown paper bag or something. So that's really nice as well. And they're both deeply cynical men, but they have this mutual not admiration, mutual help society, that they kind of help each other out a little bit in a kind of almost, you get the impression it's grudging, but it's not. So on the top, it's grudging, it's tough guy talk, but underneath, you get the impression that they kind of like each other. Anyway, I think he's in this story, his relationship with Anne Reardon is really interesting. She's a bonny lass, as they say. And he is aware of his attraction to her. It made me difficult for me to think straight just the same. This is her legs, and he wants her to put a pair of slacks on. Now, and he says, he's thought of you, I've wanted you. And so, he's laid his cards on the table in a sense, but it's him that's holding back because she wants a kiss off him. She wants him to take her out for dinner. And she says he's the nicest man. And I think that's her observation. The thing about Anne Reardon is that she sees through all this tough guy nonsense, and he's a decent bloke, and she sees that, and then she says, "Take me," but he, in his morality, there's a double bubble here, but he's too shop soiled for a girl like you. He kind of puts her on a pedestal. She's beautiful, she's decent, she's efficient. He can trust her to do things. She's everything, and he fancies her, as we say, and he snogs her, as we also say, but he feels he's too broken to give her what she deserves. Now, that's great, isn't it? So what's he doing going near her at all? Because the really decent thing would be just to steer clear of her altogether. If he really believes that he is such a bad influence, and he can hear what she's saying to him, that she actually has a bit of she holds a torch for him, then the decent thing will be to steer clear and not go near her. But he doesn't, because he needs her. But it's not just that. Maybe he could have got somebody else to watch the. But although she maybe is the best woman for the job or the best person for the job, maybe that's what. So even though he feels he shouldn't go near her, he does because he needs her. And one wonders, and this is a tribute to Chandler's ability to create a person that we think's real. I mean, Philip Marlowe's not real, but I'm thinking about him as if I know him. Like, yeah, so I would say to him, listen, mate, you know what Anne thinks of, this is me talking to Philip Marlowe. You know what Anne thinks of you. You really, you shouldn't play, you shouldn't toy with her affection. And he's like, well, no, I'm not. I mean, I'm really clear that we go out for dinner. Oh, yeah, you go out for dinner. You kissed her. Come on. Come on. What are you saying to her? You're leading her on, mate. And, and the fact, and then he looks a bit, oof, because he's like the fat lad in the cake shop too. He knows what's the right thing to do, but she is that cream-filled donut that he just can't walk away from. So, but I think, as I was saying, the tribute is the fact that we even think that he's a real person, and this is real, and that's why Chandler's great, I if I was going to talk to him, this is me talking to Raymond Chandler now, not Philip Marlowe, and I'd say, first of all, it's a bit early for the whiskey. But well, let's have one anyway, because I think we meet. I think we meet. It's a 1950s diner in Los Angeles, and it's night, and it's probably late on. It's not a diner; it's a bar because we're having whiskey, and we're having a bit of a chat. And I've forgotten what I was going to say now, but I was going to say to him, listen, you are brilliant. You are brilliant, and I think he knew he was brilliant, but. He would say, yeah, Tony, I am, but you absolutely butchered that accent.